extrapolated out to the United States out of Wuhan and Lombardy.
Yeah. What I think the governor was saying, I'm pretty sure, is that that's the total amount that he would need. You know, and we'll take him for his word about that. I mean, he's, you know, quite frankly, he's really gotten hit with a really bad situation. And quite frankly, I think he's doing a very good job. When he says 30,000 and he needs it, we'll take him for his word. We obviously want to estimate to see what he already has and what the delta is of what he'll need, as opposed to the totality of the entire period of time over the next couple of months.
But the modeling that was done on, and correct me if I'm wrong, is by the Imperial College and the American Hospital Association, and it was devastatingly frightening. And that was about the peak that we have for ICU beds, the peak for the virus and the ICU beds that we'll need. But again, looking at the Wuhan data, that's the latest data that we have, aren't those new data points that have to be used to inform our decision-making on this critical issue of overwhelming hospitals and how we have to stop that? So it's a long-winded question, but are we updating our modeling, Dr. Fauci, because this is the critical question of overwhelming our system?
You know, Laura, we always do that. We always update the model. But the one thing we have to be really careful about, and I think everybody who's been involved in this, who has experience, knows that models are only as good as the assumptions that you put into the model. And sometimes there's a real great degree of variability with those assumptions. So although we reevaluate the models continually, we've got to be careful that they don't always predict exactly what we'll need. That's just a fact.
But that's a pretty important data point, is it not? Because we're seeing, thankfully, the mortality rate decline as we test more people. And that's still terrible, but it's not perhaps as bad as that 3 and 4% number that was initially forecast. So that number of ICU beds that are needed, that's really one of, or if not one of the most critical questions that are outstanding. And if it's wrong, if the numbers are not right, then maybe that affects the decision making about when the country can gradually get back to business.
You're absolutely right, Laura, and that's exactly right. FEMA is working closely with the state of New York to try and figure out exactly what they'll need at what time. I mean, if the totality is 30,000, what do they need now, next week, the week after? But you're right, those kind of models do help inform us.
And Dr. Fauci, the news, I was reading these studies today, it's clear that men are more likely to have serious health implications because of this, more likely to get the virus, it looks like, including with hypertension, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, all factoring in the comorbidity rate once people are actually admitted into the hospital, then into the ICU. Any idea of how and why that's happening?
You know, that's a great question. We do not know. I mean, we have to be humble and say, we're really not sure. It's a little bit puzzling. There may be some mitigating factors with men, that they have a greater incidence of some underlying conditions, perhaps high blood pressure, perhaps heart disease, perhaps with smoking and lung disease. We don't know. We don't really know precisely, but there are some hints that they may have some underlying factors that are a bit more than in women.
And it looks like 57% of the individuals who were admitted into the ICU or critical care in Wuhan were people with these underlying conditions, and a strong majority were men. So that's another thing we'll figure out eventually. But Dr. Fauci, a lot of people are messaging me during the day about hydroxychloroquine and other antivirals that are now being prescribed by treating physicians in the United States and beyond. So if, heaven forbid, something happened to you, you got a positive coronavirus test, and you fell ill, would you feel comfortable taking one of these new antivirals, such as hydroxychloroquine?
You know what I would do, Laura? There are a number of clinical trials. I'm a believer in a clinical trial. Of course, at the same time, I'd want to help myself. I'd want to get an answer as to what really works or not. So I might take one of those drugs, but I would do it within the auspices of a controlled clinical trial. I've always felt that way.
And so you would take one of those drugs because we are getting some positive results. And this is wartime, right? So it's not all buttoned down and controlled. We do what we can do with what we have.
I'm not so sure, Laura, just to clarify, that I would necessarily take one of those drugs. I would take a drug that was on a clinical trial. Some of those drugs that you're mentioning are available within the context of a clinical trial. Those same drugs you can probably get from your physician if they do an off-label use, because they are already approved for other purposes like malaria and some autoimmune diseases. But myself personally, I like to get some knowledge out of it. So if I had a situation where I needed a drug, I'd look around if there was a clinical trial that would give me access within the contours of a clinical trial.
And Dr. Fauci, Americans want facts and transparency, but they also want hope. So what hope can you give them tonight?
You know, I mean, the hope that I give is that right now, to just hang on as best as you can, just please implement the recommendations of the guidelines to be able to protect yourself and those around you, avoid crowds, do the things that are on that list that we talk about essentially every night. But also know, as time goes by, as we test more drugs, as we get better and better in a vaccine, you know, I told you some time ago that a vaccine is being developed. It still will be quite a while before we have it, but it is conceivable that this may go into another season. And if it does, it will bring us that much closer to the possibility of having not only drugs available, but also a vaccine. So that's the hope for the future.
All right, Dr. Fauci, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on tonight.
Good to be with you, Laura.
All right, and coming up, Andrew.
Over the billions of dollars the government would give to corporations, Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts will join us to tell us how the Democrats have changed that.
The Democratic whip from Illinois spoke of the Four Corners process. Now, those who are watching
went before the people of New York State and I said, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you the facts the way I know it. Those facts have not changed. Those facts are not going to change. This is not a new situation. We've watched this through China. There are hundreds of thousands of cases. 80% will self-resolve. That's why experts say to me, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people have had the virus, didn't know they had it, and resolved. That's why we have to get that test that shows you had the virus because you have the antibodies. And you did resolve. And once we do that, that's how you get the economy back to work. That's how you get the backup healthcare workers. But 80% are going to self-resolve. 20% are going to need hospitals. It's not about that. It's about a very small group of people in this population who are the most vulnerable. They are older, they have compromised immune systems, they are HIV positive, or they have emphysema, or they have an underlying heart condition, or they have bad asthma, or they're recovering from cancer. Those are the people who are going to be vulnerable to the mortality of this disease. And it is only 1% or 2% of the population. But then why all of this? Because it's 1% or 2% of the population. It's lives, it's grandmothers and grandfathers and sisters and brothers. And you start to see the cases on TV. It's a 40-year-old woman who recovered from breast cancer but had a compromised immune system, and 4 children at home. That's what this is about. It's about a vulnerable population. I called the executive order that I passed Matilda's Law, my mother. It's about my mother. It's about my mother. It's about your mother. It's about your loved one. And we will do anything we can to make sure that they are protected. Again, keeping it in perspective, Johns Hopkins, 387,000 cases, studied 16,000 deaths on 387,000. 100,000 recoveries worldwide, 268,000 pending. Last point, it is about the vulnerable. It's not about 95% of us. It's about a few percent who are vulnerable. That's all this is about. Bring down that anxiety, bring down that fear, bring down that paranoia. It's not about 95% of us. And we're going to get through it because we are New York and because we've dealt with a lot of things and because we are smart. You have to be smart to make it in New York. And we are resourceful, and we are showing how resourceful we are. And because we are united, and when you are united, there is nothing you can't do. And because we are New York tough. We are tough. You have to be tough. This place makes you tough, but it makes you tough in a good way. We're going to make it because I love New York, and I love New York because New York loves you. New York loves all of you. Black and white and brown and Asian and short and tall and gay and straight. New York loves everyone. That's why I love New York. It always has, it always will. And at the end of the day, my friends, even if it is a long day, and this is a long day, love wins. Always. And it will win again through this virus. Thank you.
The way any one of those would be better than the situation we have now, because there's price gouging going on. You know, one of the manufacturers was telling me that, well, if you could up your order by some more, we would put you higher in the priority queue.
And the Attorney General addressed that yesterday, that he would handle that. Before we run out of time, I just want to play this. This is the president today from the virtual town hall. Watch this.
We are doing very well with, I think, almost all of the governors. I think we're doing very well. But, you know, it's a two-way street. They have to treat us well also. They can't say, oh, gee, we should get this, we should get that. We're doing a great job, like in New York, where we're building, as I said, 4 hospitals, 4 we're literally building hospitals and medical centers. And then I hear that, you know, there's a problem with ventilators. Well, we sent them ventilators, and they could have had 15 or 16,000. All they had to do is order them 2 years ago, but they decided not to do it. They can't blame us for that.
Quick answer, if you will. I'm up against the break here. What's your response, Governor?
Well, we were supposed to buy ventilators a couple of years ago, knowing that there'd be a pandemic 2 years later. I'm not sure that makes any sense. Here's what I know. Look, they have the ability at the federal government level to acquire what we need and to distribute it. I was very critical of the president publicly. He called me out on Twitter, I responded, and then I called the president and I told him exactly what we need. And I want to give him some credit here. He responded immediately, and we, in fact, are going to receive some ventilators and some PPE. But it's a fraction, frankly, of what we need and what we've asked for. And that's happening to every governor all across the nation. He should really bring us all together and make acquisitions that are good for everybody across the United States.
And if the president opens up the economy by Easter, will you defy, well, you said you're going to look at the signs, but would you defy a federal rollback? Or if he does it, would you defy it? The governor of New Jersey said he would. Would you do the same?
Well, you say defying a federal rollback. These are state orders. These are executive orders at the state level. What I can tell you is that I'm going to listen to the scientists and the medical doctors and keep the health and safety of the people of Illinois uppermost in my mind.
Governor Pritzker, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. If you need anything, let us know.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
The president says his Easter deadline will be driven by the hard facts. Well, our Dr. Sanjay Gupta is here with the real hard facts. He's next.
The
way he's managed it. But right now, I'd cut him some slack, give him a break, and say, I think he's legitimately trying to lead his state through a very difficult crisis. And frankly, I give him a passing grade in the way he's doing it.
Yeah, Byron, the amazing thing about all of this is that the president, he of course has to, take in everything that people are telling him. If companies are going to go bankrupt, that's going to cause huge repercussions for everybody's lives connected to that company, and whether it's Boeing or a small company. And he also has to listen to the medical professionals. So he's trying to balance all this stuff and just getting hammered for mentioning, wouldn't it be nice if we were on our way on Easter and people could go to church again? You might as well have thought that I don't know what, like took poisoned people himself or something after the reaction to his comments about Easter Sunday. What do you think about that?
Well, clearly the president is anguished by the fact that the governments and the state government and the federal government have basically shut down the American economy, put it completely on pause, and he knows the damage that it's doing, and he knows that the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to fix. But he is up against the reality of this disease, and I think that if the president were to say on Sunday, everything's open, go out and eat in a restaurant, go catch a plane, go back to business as usual, if people are still scared about the disease, then they won't do it. So the number one thing is to reduce the incidence of this virus and people's fear of it. And I know President Trump is working very hard to try to get the economy going again, but that doesn't really happen until after that fear goes down.
And Governor Huckabee, you're a governor and you're a presidential candidate. So there's a lot you're balancing. There's never going to be a perfect graph. There's never going to be a perfect chart. There's always going to be risk associated with reopening at any point, or a gradual reopening. People are still going to get infected until this thing burns itself out. So what do you tell the president tonight about his attempt to balance all these considerations, knowing that if we lose the economy, we ultimately could have more deaths, as he said, than even this horrific virus is inflicting on us?
Well, I think we saw in your first guest, and that was a terrific interview with Dr. Fauci, this is a president who is listening to the scientists and the medical professionals. Let's be clear, medicine is a science, politics is an art. Donald Trump is trying to balance the science of medicine and the advice he's getting with the art of politics, recognizing that ultimately decisions have to be made in the context of what's doable and what's possible. He's got a bunch of Democrats in the Congress who aren't interested in helping the American people replace their income and get back to work. They're just interested in political points. He's got that to deal with. He's got corporate leaders and Wall Street people who want to get the stock market up, but he's mostly got a whole lot of Americans out there who are scared to death. I think this president is handling it in exactly the executive way that he was hired to do. Thank God he's in that chair right now and not Hillary Clinton, as could have happened.
Oh my God. Wow.
Aid package moving through the Senate.
Legacies don't just...
Peyton Walsh in a deserted Trafalgar Square, London, and this is CNN.
CNN learning tonight that health professionals are drafting options that could let people ease back into society. A federal health official describing a rolling response affecting different parts of the country at different times. Chief medical correspondent Dr. SANJAY Gupta joins us now. Doctor, good evening to you. So CNN's new reporting seems to back up much of what President Trump has been saying about easing restrictions. Is that the best thing for public health right now? What do you think?
Well, I mean, the drafting of these options, for the rollbacks and to sort of ease back into normalcy, implementing something like that in the near future doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't know if they're drafting up these things to be possibly used later. I'm not sure. But I think pretty clearly, Don, even when this 15-day sort of pause was implemented, I think the idea was that at 15 days they would look at these measures, see where things are, and probably get more stringent, not less stringent at that time. And there's real world data, you know, Don, right now we are dealing with a novel coronavirus, so nobody knows for certain how this virus is going to behave. But look at China, look at South Korea. These are countries that give us some hope, right, in terms of what they've been able to do, but it was an 8 to 10 week curve over there. If you take your foot off the pedal, the concern is you're going to erase all the gains that we've been trying to make.
Yeah, I think it's fair that someone should be looking proactively about how and when to open the economy in the country back up, but I'm not sure if, you know, once we do it and when it should be done, but I'm not sure there should be like a timeline in the near future. So I think you bring up a very good point. Listen, every state is affected. Cases and deaths are rising. How would we know if an area is safe to be opened up for business as usual when the outbreak is actively spreading? I've heard people say, you know, it was interesting to me to hear the governor of New York and even the former Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, and I know Lloyd, saying you should, you know, young people it was just, to me, it was surprising to hear, because you don't know where those people are going, who they're going to come in contact with, and on and on. It was just, I don't know, it's just surprising to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think one thing the country has learned over the past week or so is the value of social distancing. It doesn't mean everyone is abiding by it by any means, but I think that people sort of fundamentally understand that this virus is contagious. It spreads person to person. If you sort of distance people, you can break the chain of transmission from you know, one person to the other. That's what we're trying to do here, so that not as many people get sick at the same time. But you're absolutely right. You know, you look at that map, Don. There's been a lot of focus on New York right now, but you know, in Michigan, cases went from 65 to 1,300 in 1 week. In Louisiana, basically no cases to close to 1,400 in 1 week. Florida and Georgia increasing by 20%. So, you know, this is clearly spreading around the country, and I would say that most of the places that have lower numbers may be a reflection of less testing. And we're also getting a picture of things from about 10 to 14 days ago, because that's how long it takes for someone to get sick, to get a test, all of that. Last 10 to 14 days down, there's no question that the virus has been spreading more. So these numbers are going to get worse. When they're considering, hey, should we start dialing things back, they're probably going to be considering that in the wake of the numbers still continuing to go up. So I think the decision is going to be pretty clear, as Dr. Fauci talks about. He's going to look at the data.
Yeah, and you said there's so much that we don't know about this. I asked you a similar question earlier last week. So much we don't have the data because there's really no history. We don't know about this virus, correct?
Yeah, I mean, when they say it's a novel coronavirus, that's in part what they mean. But from a health standpoint, the reason it's so significant is that most pathogens that are circulating around you right now, Don, you have some natural immunity to, just by virtue of your time here on this planet. Me too. With this virus, because it had never circulated before, it was novel, none of us had any native immunity to it. And that's what makes it so frightening. That's why public health officials get concerned about something like that.
Dr. Burke's saying, Doctor, that she is deeply concerned about New York, asking people who have recently left to self-quarantine for 14 days. But isn't there community spread already in just about every single state?
Yeah, this one surprised me, and I hope I get a chance to ask her specifically about that, because yes, New York is considered a hot spot. You know, I think 5% of the world's patients right now with coronavirus are in New York. That is true, but I think you're right, Don. I mean, take the example of New York going to Florida. There's more cases in New York. That could be reflective of more testing. But then telling people to go to Florida and quarantine themselves, I don't quite get it. I mean, there's cases in Washington, California, those are hot spots as well. And frankly, as you know, Don, you and I have talked about this, I mean, people should pretty much be staying home as much as possible right now anyway. So in some ways, you know, the country is sort of being recommended to quarantine as much as possible. So why to then single out New York and say New Yorkers in particular have to do a 14-day quarantine if they even go, you know, east in their own state? Not quite sure, but I hope we can dig into that a little bit more with her.
All right. Dr. Gupta, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
take their guns. There's probably thousands in the queue that pay for the guns, and New Jersey just won't allow the queue to go through.
And you are seeing, obviously, like so many gun store owners across the country, a huge uptick in your customer base, people wanting ammo, different models of guns, shotguns, semis, and so forth. Tell us about that, because that's been wild. Even ordering guns online, regular places where people go and buy ammunition, I read, they're all out.
Yes. So usually after a terrible tragedy, this business goes crazy, and nobody wants that type of business. However, during this coronavirus outbreak, if you will, the business has been so incredible that they've pretty much bought everything in the shop. Ammo, all the guns. We can't even get guns online delivered from our own distributors. People are calling. They want their guns from the queue. I've never seen it like this, ever. And nobody
What
wants
are they
business
worried
like
about, Joe? Joe, what are people afraid of? Are they afraid of social unrest? Are they afraid of not being able to get food and someone coming for their? I mean, what are people most concerned about?
People, they think the worst. They think that there could be a social breakdown, and first thing they want to protect their family. And who knows? I mean, people, they're bugging out, literally. I've never seen it like this.
So is this the high point that you've ever seen in your entire gun store owning life for gun purchase, interest, and demand?
Laura, it's been like a raving mob. They just come in, they say, just give me that gun. I want that gun. You know, the people that have the right approvals. It was almost like a locust swarm. They just come in and say, I want this gun, I want that. They don't even ask the price. I've never seen it like this. This is like the end of the world to these people, and they believe it. They actually think that this is something that's going to break down social unrest. People are going to be rioting. They have no direction. They just feel very insecure, and the first thing they want to do is protect their family.
And it probably didn't make them feel better that the gun stores were going to be deemed non-essential businesses, where other businesses, pot stores and liquor stores, are essential businesses.
The Speaker, I think very wisely asked the Rules Committee to look at the different possibilities, and they are exploring how we could do this if we have to. I think the hope is that we can have a bipartisan agreement and that we don't have to bring everyone here and we have a unanimous agreement, but we'll be ready to do whatever it takes to benefit American families.
Cars from Eric Swalwell.
Stay tuned for scenes from our next episode.
Adjusting classroom projects for home use, the new normal of e-learning at 10.
And how a local mattress maker is stepping up to ease a health mask shortage.
Quick! The Quicker Picker-Upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker and is 2 times more absorbent. Bounty, the Quicker Picker-Upper.
It's a small finger, a worm.
Like a dagger?
Tiny sword.
Breadstick.
Matchstick.
A lamppost.
Coin flop. No.
10 seconds.
A stick, a walking stick.
Right.
A bounty. A big
Sorry, it's a tandem bicycle.
What?
As long as sloths are slow, you can count on Geico saving folks money. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
After being a part of millions of love stories, at K, we believe that nothing should get in the way of love.
Stephen's Week with the former candidates continues. Kamala Harris tonight.
One of our own agents is spying for China.
From patriot to traitor.
If he tells them what he knows, people are going to die. We can't let that happen.
He's highly disciplined. He knows how to cover his tracks.
Got something.
Show me your hands. New FBI Most Wanted next Tuesday, 10/9 Central on CBS.
Listen up. Thomas Quinlan has been abducted.
Return the product or he's dead.
We have 67 minutes. This can go bad fast in many different ways.
Stick to the plan.
The FBI season finale next Tuesday at 9/8 Central on CBS.